The U.S. Capitol is full of protesters. The Senate has not listened to the anger of the people. In fact, the Senate has ignored the people. The protesters have had enough and begin rioting. The D.C. police have opened fire on the crowd. People were killed. The police asked the White House for troops. No, this wasn't the January 6, 2021 riots in Washington, D.C. This was the Bonus Army March of July 28, 1932. 89 years ago, this was the most dangerous time for our democracy. Now, to understand why there was a bonus army and a bonus march, we have to look at October 29, 1929, the day Wall Street lays an egg, as the headlines in the entertainment newspaper Variety printed on October 30th, 1929. This event also referred to as Black Tuesday. Most people agree, though, this was the starting point of the Great Depression. There were other contributing factors, however. The reasons for the crash go beyond the scope of this video. So, what I'll be doing is talking about the bonus army. By 1932, America was in a major economic depression. 1/4 of the working population was unemployed. People not only lost jobs, but they lost their life savings and their homes. One of the many iconic photos of this time period is the picture of a businessman selling apples on a street corner in New York City in a fine Brooks Brothers suit. Soup kitchens were in all the major cities to help feed the homeless and the destitute. People were desperate for any kind of relief or help they could get. Unlike today, with a wide governmental society safety net to help people, back in 1932 there was nothing. But if you were a World War I veteran, this was before World War II, so all World War I was known as the Great War or the World War, there was a ray of hope. Over the veto of President Coolidge, who said patriotism bought and paid for is not patriotism, Congress passed into law the World War Adjusted Compensation Act on May 19, 1924. Now, this act promised veterans from the World War compensation for wages lost during the service. Any veteran who served with the United States military between April 5, 1917 and July 1, 1919 was awarded $1 for each day served in the United States and $1.25 for each day served abroad. It set a maximum payment at $500. That's approximately $8,900 in 2021 dollars today. Payment, however, was not going to be issued until 1945. The veterans needed the money right then. They could not wait until 1945. Some veterans even called it the tombstone bonus. They figured they'd be dead long before 1945 ever rolled around. Well, in response to the growing crisis, Representative Wright Patman of Texas, also a World War I veteran, reintroduced his bill for early payment of the veterans bonus. One veteran in particular, former Sergeant Walter W. Waters from Portland, Oregon, began advocating for the bonus march on Washington to put pressure on Congress to pass the bill. The House of Representatives began debating the Wright-Patman bonus bill in December of 1931. Walter Waters began organizing veterans in Oregon to march on Washington. They were going to lobby the Congress to pass the bill. By May of 1932, Waters had 300 men, all unemployed, all veterans willing to march on Washington. The day came to begin their few thousand-mile trek across America. They marched through Portland, and at the head of the column was a banner. Portland Bonus March, on to Washington. Instead of a parade of smartly dressed soldiers, in step with a column of former soldiers dressed in worn shoes and threadbare clothes. Between the whole group, they had about $30 between them. Now, they jumped freight cars heading east. Food was scarce. The railroads didn't want them, so they wouldn't cooperate. Nevertheless, the March of the 300 was determined to get to D.C. Now, the first big obstacle was the Battle of East St. Louis. It wasn't a physical fight. It was a test of wills, and with it came the publicity the nascent bonus army needed to gain support, monetarily as well as publicly. The B&O Railroad made every effort to keep the bonus army off their freight trains. Word got out that a huge riot was in the making. Veterans groups, local population, and newspaper reporters gathered to see it unfold. However, they were disappointed. Nothing happened, except what was a local story turned into a national story. Ex-servicemen were headed to Washington to demand Congress pass the bonus bill. The unintended consequences of the publicity generated by B&O Railroad's refusal to carry Waters and his men in empty freight cars to Washington had stirred other veterans to head to the Capitol. By the time Waters and his 300 reached Washington, D.C. on May 29, 1932, the whole country was aware of the Bonus Army. D.C. Police Chief Glassford was well aware of the Bonus Army. He issued a public statement saying the Bonus Army had 48 hours to see the sights of Washington, then they were to go home. Representative Patman was also aware of the Bonus Army. Now, he had a different thing. He was concerned he'd be blamed and be connected somehow with organizing the march in Washington. That's the last thing he wanted. Now, Chief Glassford also realized the danger of having 800 plus men with no money roaming the city looking for a place to stay and food to eat. That was a disaster in the making. So he arranged for the Bonus Army to use an abandoned department store for shelter, and he also arranged to feed them that first night when they arrived. Within 2 days of their arrival in D.C., the 800 men turned into 10,000. That's by some estimates. Even though Chief Glassford organized food and shelter for the Bonus Army, there were forces working to remove that army any way they could. At that time, the city of Washington was administered by a group of 3 commissioners. They were appointed by the president. They were funded by Congress. Chief Glassford was in a difficult position. The federal authorities wanted the Bonus Army removed, but refused to take personal responsibility for the removal. Chief Glassford had tried to pass the job off to Congress and the War Department, saying this was a national problem, not a local one. He was told, yeah, it's a local matter, and he had to fix it. The Bonus Army was becoming an embarrassment to the government. They were receiving donations from all over the country. They had organized and set up camps along military lines. They were well disciplined. Their commander was Walter Waters, the veteran who had organized the original 300 men from Oregon. He made sure the men were disciplined and well behaved. They were there to lobby for the bonus, not to start a revolution. He understood the public perception. Shining a light on Congress and their machinations was not something elected officials wanted to explain to their constituents back home. Even today they feel that way. The Bonus Army started lobbying congressmen. Full pressure was exerted on Congress. Waters stated a couple of veterans were always sitting in each representative's waiting room. The representatives were solicited outside the building as well, and never once allowed to forget that a large group of men was in Washington to secure consideration of the bonus bill. Veterans were arriving in Washington at an alarming rate. The abandoned department store Chief Glassford had secured for the original men could not handle the additional influx of men. Glassford received permission from the Parks Commission to have the Bonus Army set up a camp on the mud flats of Anacostia Field across the Potomac River. They could get most of those guys out of Washington. Now, on June 15, 1932, the Wright-Patman bill was passed in the House of Representatives. The veterans were thrilled. It was passed by a vote of 211 to 176. The next day, the Senate's Finance Committee convened, but they convened to kill the bill in committee. A motion was put forth to send the bill to the Senate for a vote, and the committee voted 12 to 2 to kill it. However, Senator John Thomas from Oklahoma, a veteran from World War II, argued the bill should be sent to the Senate for a vote. He succeeded, and the vote was set for the following day, July 17, 1932. 8,000 men gathered outside the Capitol building shouting for passage of the bill. The senators could hear the angry protests as they debated the fate of the bill. The reasons to defeat the bill were varied. It will bankrupt the country. We'll have to go off the gold standard if we authorize early payment of this bonus. They aren't the only people that are suffering. There are others. It wouldn't be fair. Well, as the senators droned on, the clock ticked away hour after hour. The veterans grew restless and frustrated. The Senate debated. Officials became worried that the men would become violent. Representatives who supported the men and the bill came out and they cautioned the crowd to remain calm and to maintain proper behavior, otherwise disaster. The men started chanting, "We want the bonus, we want the bonus, we want the bonus." Capitol Police were among the men. The D.C. Metropolitan Police reinforced the Capitol Police, and the question came up, what would the men do if the bill was defeated? Would they riot? Would they storm the Capitol building? When the news came, the men were silent. The bill had been defeated, 62 to 18. Waters addressed the 8,000 men. He told them it wasn't over, they would have more men, and they would stay until they changed the minds of these guys. You're 10 times better Americans than the senators that voted against this bill. Waters then told the men to sing America and to go back to your billets. So they could hear the sounds, the senators could hear the sounds. They were waiting in the Senate chambers, worrying how they could get out of there without being accosted by angry veterans. They heard the veterans singing America. One by one, the senators found their way out of the Capitol building, probably ashamed with their heads down, trying not to be recognized. It was not over, however. The next day, the Bonus Army announced it would stay in D.C. until the end of this congressional session, or until 1945, if necessary. Bonus Army called for more volunteers to come to Washington. Now the government began in earnest to get the Bonus Army out. It was at this point that the opportunists came out, trying to enrich themselves monetarily and politically. Some saw the Bonus Army as a political force to be wielded for power and money, others as a chance to line their pockets with money quickly. The Communist Party, USA, tried to infiltrate the Bonus Army, but weren't successful. Every time a Communist Party member tried to stir up trouble, the veterans would throw him out of the camp. Per Waters in his book. With Congress in adjournment, there really was no reason for staying in Washington, D.C. The Bonus Army began to dissolve. However, it was not dissolving fast enough as far as the government and the administration was concerned. By July 26, the unofficial record kept by the Bonus Army showed approximately 15,000 Bonus Army members still in D.C., way too many for the government. The administration, seeing these remaining men as a threat to national security, decided it was time to act. On July 28th, President Hoover ordered the D.C. commissioners to remove the Bonus Army. The commissioners ordered Glassford to clear the Bonus Army out of the abandoned buildings they were inhabiting. The police arrived, roped off the building to be cleared. Most of the men gathered what little belongings they had, and they peacefully left. Waters recalled in his book that the Red agitators were the ones trying to stir up the trouble and caused the riot that morning. It wasn't until the afternoon of the 28th that events turned fatal. Officer Chenault shot 2 members of the Bonus Army, most likely out of fear. William Huska and Eric Carlson would die of their wounds later. President Hoover gave the order to the Secretary of the Army, Hurley, to clear the mob out of the city. The order went out to Army Chief of Staff, General Douglas MacArthur. Remove the veterans from the city. MacArthur had been planning for this event for 2 months. He had the troops at Fort Myers training and riot control. MacArthur planned to take command of the troops. His personal aide, Dwight D. Eisenhower, advised the general to delegate the operation to a lower-ranking officer and not be seen taking part in the forcible removal of the veterans. MacArthur not only disagreed with Eisenhower's advice, he ordered Eisenhower into full uniform and to accompany him to the field. MacArthur donned his uniform. Now, at that time, personnel were allowed to wear civilian clothes while working at the War Department. And guess what he had on his uniform? All of his medals. And he took command of his troops. He was going to make sure this was done properly. There was 1 battalion from the 12th Infantry, 1 squadron from the 3rd Cavalry, 1 platoon of tanks headed by George Patton, and the headquarters troop from the 16th Brigade. They assembled on the ellipse, that's the grassy lawn across from the White House. MacArthur gave the order to clear the city of Washington of all veterans. Now Walter Waters described what happened next. At 4 o'clock, the column moved down Pennsylvania Ave. Here the men were wearing gas masks and carrying drawn sabers in open trucks. Machine guns were stripped for action. General MacArthur, Chief of Staff of the United States Army, led the way in full uniform. MacArthur's orders from Secretary Hurley were simple and direct. The President has just informed me that the civil government of the District of Columbia has reported to him that it is unable to maintain law and order in the district. You will have United States troops proceed immediately to the scene of disorder. Cooperate fully with the District of Columbia Police, which is now in charge. Surround the affected area and clear it out without delay. Turn over all prisoners to civil authorities. The orders then went on to state, in your orders, insist that any woman and children who may be in the affected area be accorded every consideration and kindness. Use all humanity consistent with due execution of this order. And with that, MacArthur's troops proceeded. By 5 p.m., the troops were deployed and began moving the veterans out of D.C. This was done by throwing tear gas at their feet, forcing them to evacuate the area. When they reached the first of the billets, the Army moved in and chased the veterans out with bayonets and tear gas. Moving from one shanty shack to the next, the Army set fire to them, whether with tear gas or on purpose. There were tear gas canisters thrown into the crowd. The veterans picked up the tear gas canisters and threw them back. They hurled bricks at the Army. The Army used bayonets on the veterans if they were not moving fast enough. The troops continued burning down the shacks and shanties along Pennsylvania Avenue until early evening. Those veterans who crossed the river and encamped on the Anacostia mudflats prepared for the oncoming assault. MacArthur took matters into his own hands. By 9 p.m., troops were crossing the bridge to Anacostia. Secretary Hurley had sent 2 high-ranking officers to inform MacArthur he was not to cross the bridge into Anacostia. Major Eisenhower recalled General MacArthur's response. He was too busy and did not want either himself or his staff bothered by people coming down and pretending to bring orders. By 11 p.m., the troops were at Anacostia Flats and began moving the bonus army out. This time, there were women and children in the encampment. Tear gas and bayonets were the order of the day. The troops moved through the camp, methodically pushing the veterans and their families out. Tear gas set off more fires as well. The troops set them off on their own, and the veterans started burning the tents as well. Waters recalled the pungent odor of burning tar paper absorbed all other odors. The reflection of flames was long in the night. It could be seen from the White House. It cast a rosy reflection, like some sardonic benediction on the Capitol dome. Fallout from this event turned the people against President Hoover. That November 3rd, he was defeated in his re-election bid for the presidency. Now, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was elected the 32nd President of the United States, but Roosevelt didn't help the veterans. He didn't authorize the payment of the bonus money. It was Congress. With Democrats holding majority in both houses, which passed the Adjusted Compensation Payment Act in 1936, authorizing immediate payment of the $2 billion in World War I bonuses, and then they had to override Roosevelt's veto of the measure. The House voted finally 324 to 61, and the Senate voted 76 to 19. Now, as a direct result of the bonus march by the World War I veterans, the Servicemen's Readjusted Act of 1945 was passed in Congress, also known as the GI Bill of Rights. This act gave returning servicemen the opportunity to buy homes, go to college, set up businesses. It changed American society forever. This is our history. It's our heritage. Now, I hope you liked this video. If you did, hit the like button, share the video, and please subscribe to my channel. I'll be posting videos every 2 weeks. Thank you.